Hello, we are back. Thank you for downloading, streaming, however you listen to this podcast. It's the second episode today of Inside the Mind, a very special project that I'm working on throughout November to raise awareness about men's mental health. And the episode today is with Dave McNeill. What can I tell you about Dave? 3 times Olympian. He was back on the show in the very early days of Inside Running. I'm going to say in between episode 100 and episode I don't know, maybe 120, 130. I might put the exact episode in the show notes. So if you're not sure who he is, go back and listen to his full-length interview he did with Croaks. I don't know Dave really well. I've watched him race a lot over the years, but haven't really had too many conversations with him. But he's always struck me as a really kind of wise head. Someone who's not just like a robot of Australian distance running. And I feel like if we had to come up with a movie script for Australian distance running, Dave would be like a wizard type character. He just seems really wise, really mature. He's been through so much with his ups and downs, with his injuries over the years. 3 times Olympian. He went to Tokyo last year. He spoke about that in a lot of detail in this chat. He went to Rio and also went to London back in 2012. And just feels like he's been around forever. So we've got some good stories about running in there, some good stories about how he manages his mental health, and I really hope you enjoy this chat with Dave. A massive thank you to all the people who wrote in about the episode with Andy, especially those people on Patreon. I'm taking that feedback on about who you want for future guests, and really kind of appreciate the insight that people have given me after they've listened to the episode. Enjoy this one, and thanks again for letting us be in your ears to have these conversations. See you guys. Hello, Dave McNeill, and thank you for being involved in this little project. Just talking off air, it was a while ago you were actually on an Inside Running podcast interview, and when I come to making a list of people I wanted to chat to for this project, your name was very close to the top of the list, so a massive thanks for being involved to talk about some mental health stuff.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for having me back. I had Croaks interviewing me last time, so good to mix it up.
I've got to be careful because I was just thinking about my earliest memory of you was when you won Zatopek. You must have been pretty young, I reckon, at the old Olympic Park. You were in your old Zavs, old Melburnians singlet, the red and Zavs. Black. I remember you had the, this was a while ago. You'll be able to tell me exactly what year it was. You had your pass. So listeners might not know this, but when you're an elite athlete, you get the little pass to get in. So you can go warm up, and you don't get hassled trying to get in and out of the stadium. But it was just like a bit of pink ribbon, and I reckon you tied yours around your bicep.
Oh no! So that wasn't a security pass. That was
what was it?
It was a intentional pink armband, and I feel like other athletes had it on as well because it was probably less than a week after Karen McCann had passed away.
Oh, okay. Because I'd seen a number of people with it on their arms and just thought it was a security in and out.
Yeah, no, it was, and partly because, she'd obviously had a battle with breast cancer. That was the reason for the pink armband as opposed to like a black armband.
And you had it up on your bicep, was that right?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, from memory. I wouldn't have remembered that until you mentioned it. But yeah.
Because what year are we talking? 2009?
That was 2008.
Okay. Yeah. And was that your first? You would have just been still a kid, wouldn't you? Coming out of.
It certainly felt like it. I mean, it was when I was 22 then. So, and it was my second Zatopek. I'd done it in 2006 and finished maybe 4th overall. It was the year that Galen Rupp had come down and done it.
That's right, yeah.
And finished second Aussie that year. So, but back in 2008, which is 15 years ago now.
Hey, and you'll still be in action in a couple of weeks' time, won't you? You'll be teeing up for.
Yeah, that's the plan. That's the plan. Yeah. I just actually. I've done pretty well, but I finally got COVID a couple of weeks ago, which is it hasn't been much fun. But it definitely put a bit of a dampener on my harder training. So I'm hoping that'll re- kind of fix itself over the next couple of weeks. But yeah,
This was
definitely
after
that's
you
the
won
plan.
Melbourne Marathon 10K? In
Yeah,
between
just
then and now? Yeah.
afterwards. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think with a lot of other people as well, it clearly was going around probably all the after parties after Melbourne.
Yeah, everyone's celebrating. Can you, that day, like, remind me, was it a huge kick with like 300 metres to go? You peeled out on the back straight?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. I mean, that was my sort of MO when I was a bit younger and had some wheels on me. Not sure I've got them
Nah,
anymore,
you've
but
still got them.
yeah, no, I usually was usually would if I was in it, it would be usually about 300 to go that I'd try and kick down. But yeah, it was I think it was just probably a good example of just the right amount of naivety going into that race, and also I think just almost a feeling of nothing to gain, nothing to lose, and that culminating in probably not having a lot of pressure on myself, and being around pretty elite company at that time. Like I think Collis had just come off a second place at the short-lived Great Australian Run.
Oh, yeah. He beat Mottram
Which
there too, didn't he?
yeah, Mottram, and he'd beaten Mottram, and Gebre Selassie had come down for it, so it was kind of a big deal, and it seemed at the time promising that Australia might have like a really really big road race at the time, but I don't think it lasted more than a couple of years. But yeah, so he was obviously in really good form. There was a Austrian guy who was training with MTC at the time.
He used to wear the long socks, didn't he? The long
Yeah,
compression
yeah,
socks, yeah.
yep,
I remember
yep.
that guy.
And then Bobby Curtis
Curtis,
was there as well, and he was in good form. Like I think he'd run probably in the 27s I think that year, and I'd raced against him in college. Actually, just earlier that year, so only 6 months earlier, and he'd won NCAAs in the 5K where I'd done my first NCAAs. So I didn't really fancy myself, and I'd just come off cross country season in the US, so I guess I was in decent 10K shape, but set like a minute PB, and just was, I think in hindsight, probably it was just the right sort of race for me, and not too quick, not too slow, and I just held on for dear life, and was fortunately there with a lap to go, and at the time I was usually fancied myself with a lap to go, but I don't fancy myself so much anymore.
Yeah, I just remember driving back to Bendigo with a car full of people, and it was like, yeah, you would have been like the 5th or 6th, like ranked, or you just felt like the underdog, like the kid from Melbourne who'd gone to college and come back and tout up all these pros.
Yeah, I was definitely not. Definitely wouldn't have been one of the favourites. So, I remember being quite shocked as well. And but yeah, it's certainly a very happy memory. It was pretty special to do it. And actually, just thinking about Olympic Parks, what an awesome place that was.
That was amazing.
And it's just, you can't really replace that. It was, glad to have run during a time where we did have Olympic Park.
Because the fence was pretty much on the outside of lane 8, wasn't it? Like on the back
it was
straight anyway.
on the back straight.
So then when they let you in, it felt like you were even more like you didn't have to then walk over the long jump pits to then get to lane 8. Like you were. Yeah. I remember being so inspired and just remember you winning that time and just being like, oh my gosh, this is like elite running and it's so close to us that you can touch almost.
Yeah. It was just such a beautiful vibe there, and not to diss Lakeside, but it's just not quite the same. And I think, part of it's probably the history. Part of it's also was always much better conditions there. Didn't get the Lakeside winds through the stadium, but you and I are probably pretty similar ages, Brady. So we grew up doing states and stuff at Olympic Park, and you just had those. I had really early running memories there, and remember getting hot chips in the back of the stadium after states and things like that. And I remember going to like APS, having APS track meets there, and it was pretty cool, venue, and it was my first foray into, I guess the senior rank. So it was a pretty cool experience.
Now, Dave, I didn't expect us to go there straight away, but I'm glad we kind of did and just get some run and chat in there. But we are talking about mental health in this episode. And last night I did one of these with Andy Buchanan. So I've got his answers fresh in my head, and I'm kind of interested to be able to compare them. But I asked him, and I'm going to ask you at the moment, and you've just told me you've come off a bit of COVID, so this could kind of impact it a bit, but a score out of 10 for your own mental health at the moment, and why are you giving it this score?
Ooh, yeah. So I'm going to give it an 8, and I'll tell you where my mind sort of wanders and thinks with 8.
Yeah.
So I kind of think, 8 out of 10. If I was in school and I had an assignment or something and I got 8 out of 10, that would count as an A, I'd say.
Mm.
So I'd give my mental health at the moment an A. Probably not perfect, but I'm in a really good spot at the moment. Why am I giving it 8? And maybe why am I not giving it 10? 8 because running wise, like I'm in a really just happy part of my relationship with running. I'm busy doing a lot of different things, so I think the variety certainly in my case lends itself to probably better mental health, and then I think just a combination of factors and just the passage of time and wisdom, whatever you want to call it, but where I am now, I might have given that a different score at a different time in my life. So it's to say, like, life's not perfect, but it rarely is, and it's and I think the things that are maybe areas for improvement are probably really sort of inspiring things for me now. Whereas maybe in the past they might have appeared more daunting things. So yeah, not a perfect 10 because I don't think that's ever really possible. But I'm certainly in a pretty good place at the moment, and I could certainly list off heaps of things that are not going great, but their impact on my mental health isn't a real, doesn't blunt it really. It's this sort of ever present areas that require constant work and constant attention, but I'm in a pretty good position, and I guess I've got the tools at my disposal to kind of address them and sort of start each new day feeling pretty good these days.
Yeah, and is it something, like you said, tools, but like something you work on day to day to, like, you got things in your life that you're like, all right, this is stuff I need to tick off on a day to day or once a week kind of time scale to make sure I keep that mental health at an 8 out of 10?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and the simple answer is probably yes, but the probably more complicated answer is that honestly, on a day-to-day basis, I probably take for granted a lot of the things that I do, and a lot of the things that are really helpful to me in terms of keeping a pretty even keel. I think in some ways they're very much second nature to me now, and that certainly wasn't the case. That's not been the case in the past. But I think, like, at this point in my career, probably more than at any other time. And yeah, career being running, work, career is probably the wrong word. Just at this point in my life, I, when when overwhelming things kind of come to the forefront of my mind, I'm pretty good at breathing these days. I'm pretty good at quickly drawing on past experiences to remind myself that, quote unquote, these times will pass. They usually do. I'm also pretty quick to recognize, and honestly just be grateful for the fact that life's full of ups and downs. And, you literally can't have the ups unless you have the downs, and you can't have the downs unless you have the ups. So I think my perspective on, challenging circumstances or periods where I'm feeling particularly anxious or just having a bit of a rough trot, I've got almost like a bit of an almost ingrained, almost natural ability now, which certainly didn't used to have. But it's good we're chatting about this because I probably do take it for granted now. The work that I've put in to do that, but it comes a lot more naturally to me now. And I think particularly in a month like this, with Movember and what we're doing here and having these conversations, like it's a good reminder for me to not take those things for granted, and that there's probably value in sharing, how it is that, I kind of manage my mental health.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's like, I think it's so individual at times, and then I don't know, if someone's having a rough trot, it could be me down the road kind of thing, and just thinking like, I remember Dave McNeill mentioning breath work, or like, remembering hard times will pass, or whatever it is, like just something that you can grab at that you might not have thought of before, that somebody else, and especially like a high performer like yourself who's, been to 3 Olympics, juggles the physio work at the moment, still can win fun runs like Melbourne 10K a couple of weeks ago, and might win Zatopek in a couple of weeks, and just, I don't know, like I just feel like sometimes, as you kind of said, you probably take for granted. And I'm sure you're a well-read and listened to podcast, and people who you surround yourself with have given you some great tools over the years.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. The surrounding yourself, that's a huge component of it. I think certainly the day-to-day stuff, and most of us most of the time pretty much spending our time with ourselves. It's just us and all the thoughts that are between our ears. That's the case for most people.
Well, even when you're with other people, you still got shit going on.
Exactly.
In your own head. Yeah,
exactly. You can be working, you can have family, you can have kids, and but the vast majority of the time, it really is just you and your thoughts. And then it's kind of a matter of what you do with them. And I think, one of the things that I think really sustains me and helps me, and this is probably one thing that I really don't take for granted, and I'm very intentional about making sure that I make time for, is I make time for people that when I'm around them, they just energize me. And so, what that person looks like and why they energize me is probably very different to someone else. But I find, there's certain people which I'll give an example, because it's like, I feel like a lot of people would know my relationship with my long-term counselor and psychologist, Bert, who I've spoken a lot about in other podcasts and have interviewed in podcasts as well. But he and I catch up at least once a month, not for any therapy, but just as really good mates. And we just, he's an example of the sort of person I could sit and talk to for 3 hours, and we could talk about nothing, but also talk about everything. So I think that's I really value those times and those relationships, and I make sure that I make time to have that, and it might not be every day, and sometimes it might not be every week, but I think if whenever things are maybe getting a little bit out of skew, or I'm finding myself less able to manage or address or kind of tackle mental health challenges. It's often not necessarily advice or therapy that I need. It's just to be energized by in my case often it's other people, but it's it's certain people, and I'm fortunate that I've met and have lots of those people in my life. But I think that's a huge part of it, in terms of where that sort of energy comes from to kind of approach times and situations where you might be challenged, or where life's kind of pretty blue, or pretty anxious or nerve-wracking. That's definitely a big part of it.
And have there been times over the years where like you might have a catch up, planned for 2 or 3 weeks time, and it's like, hey Bert, we got to do this like ASAP tomorrow. When's the next time you can jump on Zoom?
Yeah, absolutely. Fortunately not as much in the last few years, or last couple of years, but and I've spoken about this before, but 2021 was a particularly challenging year, and really took me to the edge of my limits, and it was probably a time where sometimes the overwhelm just gets too much, and you can have all the tools and all the knowledge and experience and having managed and dealt with similar situations before, but that was probably one of those times, and it was it was a huge part of it was grief. My uncle had passed away, and one of my best friends, Dan, had passed away, and that was a time where I was just overwhelmed with grief, and it was showing up in interesting ways. You kind of, I think I'd always seen grief in sort of through a vacuum, which is this sadness about a certain thing, but it was really impacting every facet of my life. My ability to work, to focus, my sense of enjoyment or joy that I got from things, and I certainly remember on a drive to work one day, and just being overwhelmed with thoughts which were certainly not healthy, and thank goodness I was in a position where I could very quickly just say, hey, I need some help here. And I know that's not necessarily a natural reaction for everyone. So I'm really, I'm fortunate that was my first reaction, is just to yell out and say, hey, I need some help. But hopefully,
that's post Olympics. Like you talk about balancing work and getting joy at moments, but this is also the year you went to the Olympics for the third time.
Yeah, it was pre Olympics. So this all kind of all unfolded in sort of January, February 2021, and admittedly, it probably took 12, 18 months for it to kind of at least be managed and under control. It kind of had various impacts which kind of kept going for a while, but piece by piece, like I I found ways to manage that grief, and I think my getting to the Olympics in 2021 was very much a product of that. I think it was I almost funneled that grief into a single-minded focus on being as absolutely present as I could be when I was running and when I was training. So it was almost like if I could, when I could be really, really present in the run, I wasn't with my grief. And it was also a really, really potent way of, honoring, two really pivotal people in my running career. My uncle had been a huge supporter, and Dan also. Dan had been there, come and watch me run in the Rio Olympics, and so there was a huge motivation there to just honour them, I guess. Probably without them, I remember at the start of 2021, I think I did the Box Hill burn, and I definitely got burned. I was probably right up the back in, just under 14 minutes, and it just kind of snapped me out of myself at that time, and I recognised that I was anywhere but on the track running. I was just not there, and then all of a sudden, the next day and onwards, I was there, and I showed up and had a newfound intention, and it wasn't like I suddenly got fitter, but a month and a half later, I ran 13:12. So
in Perth, wasn't it? Did you do Perth? Yeah, ran like a time trial almost with Ramsden.
Yeah, exactly. I pretty much, let's be honest, it pretty much was, and it was, we were gifted perfect pacing by Stewie. So
that's right. Yeah, did he go to like 4.2K or something like that?
Yeah, he went. Yeah, about that. Yeah, about 2 laps to go. Yeah. So we were pretty lucky.
And it's like a big hypothetical, but running was obviously so important in your life at that time, and you've got a I don't know if rich history would be the right word, of being injured, having injuries. What would have happened if that was at a stage when you had a stress fracture? Because how many have you had over the years?
more than I can count.
Yeah.
I honestly couldn't tell you. I've had a lot.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is running must have been so important for you, but it could have easily not been there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been plenty of times that it hasn't. And I think, certainly, I guess so many times on the sidelines, you learn something new each time, and you also make a lot of the same mistakes over and over again. It's funny running such a weird endeavor. It's like it's so like if you take that 30,000 foot view and you're just looking down and you watch people and they go out running and they're just putting left foot, right foot in front of each other, like cool, like that looks easy. Like what on earth are you doing that for? It is such a simple thing, and yet I feel like runners are almost predisposed to making it as complicated as possible, and I think in injuries or bad races, or when things generally aren't going well, we're still putting left foot in front of the right one, in front of the left, just over and over, but we just find all of these ways to layer it in context and layer it in emotion and layer it in all of these different things, and therefore, like, each time something goes wrong, it's like you learn something, but then there's like 99 other things that you missed, and then you make the same mistake again, and then you learn another thing. And I'm sure I will still get injured down the track, and I'm sure I'll still have time on the sidelines, but I guess going through them, certain themes have started to emerge, and certainly now more than ever, I value the balance that I've got in life. So I have other things going on. I think I always valued that. I think a lot of the time took it for granted. Like I can look back on when I was running really well and like on this like really steep improvement curve when I was in college in the US. And basically I was studying full time and I was a pretty good student. I was, probably like a lot of like, runners, a bit of a perfectionist. So, I always did everything to the best of my ability, and so there was kind of always this like balance there. I had an endeavor outside of running. I had a good social network with a team, and then I finished running in college, and then I kind of did the professional thing, and then all of a sudden was just running, and lo and behold, that's kind of when I was probably had the longest stretch of injuries, and probably enjoyed my running. Oh, actually, I wouldn't say I enjoyed it the least, but I probably was much. My mental health was probably a lot worse when I wasn't running during those times. Whereas now, I certainly if I can't run, it absolutely sucks. But I also recognize like a lot of the things that I get from running from a mental health perspective, I've found that I can actually get them from a lot of other places as well. Being outside in nature, don't have to be running 15 k's an hour to do it. I can just walk if I need to.
Yeah. The same
Walking's pretty
endorphins
good.
though? Do you feel just as good afterwards?
So yeah, the endorphins is probably not the same, but I remember actually it was a real kind of eye opener. But after the Tokyo Olympics, Melbourne was in a strict lockdown, and I just got out of hotel quarantine.
Shit. So all that stuff that now you're talking about, and I'm sure you did talk about it at the time, and I might not just have heard it, but yeah, given the context of that into the Olympics, and then you were saying how you're using running as so much of an outlet, and then it's like the big race is over. We're going to put you in a hotel for 2 weeks, and then go into a lockdown in Melbourne.
Yeah. So our hotel quarantine was up in Brisbane, and so I had 2 weeks of not much to do. So, and I knew it would be the same once I got back to Melbourne. So I opted to stay in Queensland because they weren't in lockdown. And so I got out of lockdown, and I hired a van and kind of went camping around southeast Queensland. And I remember getting out of hotel quarantine, going and getting this van and driving to I think Lamington National Park, and then going for a run. And 2 weeks of doing nothing, and I went out for a 10k run, and it was glorious. But then of course the next day could barely move because I'd gone up and down some hills, and so I thought let's just have a day off running today, and then I'll try again tomorrow. And I remember going for a big long hike, which it was on this like beautiful track, which I would have loved to have run, but walking it, yeah, I mean, it sounds so silly, but like you get more time to see and take in what's around you. When you're running, you get the added element of you're breathing a lot harder, so you're getting a lot more oxygen, and you get the rush and the endorphins. But especially when you're on trails, you're often just looking down at the ground, making sure that you don't trip over any tree roots or rocks. And I just remembered, being kind of forced to slow down and walk instead. And no, it wasn't the same as running, but I got something more out of it. I probably even more so felt, kind of like don't want to sound too hippie or hoodoo guru, but I felt a bit more connected to nature because I could actually like take it in, breathe slowly and kind of, just sort of imagine, the oxygen coming out of these trees, and then I'm breathing it in, and then I'm breathing CO2 out, and the trees are taking it. And then you just pause and stop and think about those things, and it's that in itself is kind of gives you, or at least it gives me a bit of a rush. It might be just me, but I think examples like that are some of the things that that energize me, and I keep talking about energizing, but I think in how you manage and address your mental health, or at times mental ill health, I think has a lot to do with that energy is a big part of it. Certainly having tools and support is that's kind of the obvious part of it, but at its core it's kind of like just having enough energy to actually face it and deal with it, and recognize that in any given moment, it's very rare that we're in a life or death situation, even when life is really, really overwhelming. There's not many times, and I don't think it'd be very rare that I've had life or death moments. Maybe a few times crossing the road, but that's about it.
What about like performance anxiety? Like obviously you've been to 3 Olympics. I can't imagine what it's like sitting in those call rooms. You would have been in there with Galen Rupp, Mo Farahs, those kind of people over the years, the Kenyans, the Ethiopians, even back to your college career, which was pretty decorated with some high performances. Like we've got a lot of listeners who probably don't run as fast as you do, but they're on start lines and they've probably got a bit of like that anxiousness and nervousness and probably a bit of just stuff rolling through their head. Like how do you deal with it? Because you've been obviously so successful over the years and been able to execute well in races.
Yeah, I have, but in the same token, I've also been really shit at it too. I've been really fortunate that I've got my shit together at the right times and run an Olympics, but I've been in plenty of races where I've absolutely stunk, and not for lack of fitness, but exactly what you said, not necessarily managing nerves and anxiety very well. And so I think if I've learned anything about it, it's the anxiety and nerves, whether it's to do with racing or whether it's got nothing to do with racing, whether it's just life. But it's exactly like running. Yeah, if you want to get better at it and you want to win races, you got to train it and you got to practice. And I think one of the reasons it's always been something that I have had to work on, and it has been challenging, is that each time you get injured and you're away from racing, when you're away from start lines and call rooms and setting goals and working towards something and things getting closer, and then the nerves start to come in. If you're not practicing it, you lose it. And that's been my experience, is that generally I run best not only when I've had consistent training, but when I've also been consistently racing too. So I think a big part of how I deal with it is you have to throw yourself in the deep end. Sometimes I think actually winning at the 10K and Melbourne Marathon was probably I have been racing during the year, and sort of not at a super high level, just kind of or not, I guess not at the level that I'm accustomed to racing at, but running the Melbourne kind of felt like it was one of the few races where I was really, really proud of how I executed it. And and it kind of was a reminder of, hey, actually maybe I'm learning these things. Maybe that some of these things are finally sticking 37 years later. But I had a plan, and I went through my head, 2 days before, all of the scenarios that I'd encounter, which would be like, this is getting really hard now. I'm going to back off here, or I don't think I can go with this. And it kind of was exactly that. And I did exactly what I planned to do, and it paid off. I actually probably didn't really care so much whether I won or not. I was more just interested in, could I actually execute the plan that I had, and I did, and it was fortunate that it gave me a win. But the reason I mentioned that is, I think all of those things takes practice, and the best practice is just putting yourself in those situations sometimes, and taking the time to be critical and be reflective. And I've been fortunate to have, as far as coaches go at that really top echelon, and as far as coaches go, having been around, some of the best athletes in the world, Nick Biddow's been, from a mental preparedness perspective, is been a major part of, my learnings of how to particularly in race situations, how to deal with nerves and anxiety. And there's kind of been, I guess there's two elements or two themes to the advice that I guess Nick's always given me. And part of it is you want to have a plan, and it's got to be an adaptable plan. But at the end of the day, your results often take care of themselves. But how happy or satisfied you are with the race usually has to do with how well you executed what you wanted to do, and therefore how proud you can be of the performance you put up. And that's absolutely rung true, is that you can sometimes be disappointed with results and where you finish and times you run, but really at the core of it, you're often disappointed with how you executed, and whether you believed in yourself at the right times, and whether you kind of shut out, the voices that you expect are going to come in and say, geez, this is fucking hurting at the moment, but I can probably actually cope with this because I've trained for this. But that's always been, it's something I've always had to work on, and will continue to work on. I think that regular exposure is a big part of it. Sometimes you do just have to throw yourself in the deep end.
Yeah, I love that. So when you say you sat down a couple of days before Melbourne, you sit down and write it, and this is what could potentially happen, this is how I'm going to react, or you're sitting there and just closing your eyes and think about it. And I love the whole thing, because that whole process thing doesn't matter if you're trying to win a race, or you're trying to run a certain time, or where you're finishing, what pace you're running. It's so relevant for everyone who's listening.
Yeah. I don't do a lot of writing, or writing stuff down. A lot of it's mostly just conversations I have in my head. Yeah. That happens a lot.
But we complicate it, don't we? Yeah. It's very much I think I'm this fit, I should go out at this pace. What am I? I've been in call rooms and stuff before, nowhere near the call rooms you've been in, but it's just this is a very simple sport. I'm not sure why you're nervous, because you just got to put one foot in front of the other and make sure you're in the right pace range that you think you can maintain for X amount of Ks, and just do it.
Yeah, and I think in the case of before Melbourne, I knew where I wanted to. My goal in Melbourne was to be tough at a particular time. It was to be tough at 8K. And that's kind of what I did. I was still there at 8K, and then that's where I kind of put the hammer down and ran to the finish line. But I think I remember before Tokyo, Tokyo was my third Olympics, and my first Olympics I butchered. I had no plan, and had no idea what I was doing, and the result showed. And then Rio, I had a reasonable plan, not really detailed, but a reasonable plan, and I probably, in terms of execution, probably was like a 7 out of 10. So I was pretty happy with it. There was just one point in the race where the pack split up, and I got stuck in the second pack, and then wasted energy catching back up to the front pack for a couple of laps. And then and so with that in mind, I was like, I remember going to Tokyo, and I was like, I really want to try and execute even better. And I went as far as, like, I was watching old Olympic 5K heats and world champs 5K heats and finals, and I had conversations with Nick, and yeah, I mean, I don't know, I feel like better to share than to like keep the knowledge secret. But like, I think, like, you know, particularly over the 5K, it's like it's a race of thirds. You know, you spend, and this was how Nick kind of put it to me, is like you spend about 4 laps just staying out of trouble. You spend about 4 laps making kind of getting yourself into position, and then you spend 4 laps racing essentially. And so and that's kind of how I'd approach Tokyo. And I think what let me down was probably the middle 4 laps. So I didn't quite get myself in the right position, and yeah, it cost me. Like, I think I ran the fastest last K of anyone in the race, but I was just in the wrong position at a K to go. And if I was in the right position, I probably would have been okay. But it's like, it's those marginal things. And going back to what I said before, is like, you can make the same mistake a million times, and you'll find, and it's not that you're not learning from it, it's just that you're always just fine tuning it and finding a way to do it better. Yeah. So
last one for you, Dave, because you've been generous with your time tonight. What kind of resources and stuff do you use, if any, to like better yourself in this kind of situation that maybe the listeners can check out for themselves?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think it's just simple stuff like having you know, the right network of people around you. And I've been really fortunate in that respect, is that you know, I've got people that I love and that love me, and I've also, you know, I can't overstate how big an impact, my friend Bert's had on my life. Like, that's essentially been his life work, is you know, the mind, and certainly the mind in athletes. And I owe a lot of what I know and the way that I live to, you know, lessons I've learnt from him. He's not the only person. I've had lots of great teachers, but you know, in terms of resources, it's just finding the right people that, again, like I talk about energy, you want to try and find people that energize you, and you know, whether that's maybe that's a finding a psychologist or a therapist, and particularly one that you gel with and you connect with. Connection's a massive part of it, and it's okay if you do need help and you seek help, and the first person that you find isn't necessarily the right person. That sometimes happens, and I think I've certainly spoken to and seen other people, and it's okay. It doesn't. We don't always connect and click with everyone. But when you do, like, hold on to that, hold on real tight, and nurture it, and put your own energy into it, because it will invariably give energy back. So yeah, that's probably the first thing, is your resources is the people around you and the ones that energize you. You know, other stuff, the other tools and things are just things that I've learned along the way. And I've talked probably a lot about them, and breathing's a big part of it, but also a lot of it's just every time that voice in your head it could be the voice of nerves, it could be the voice of anxiety, it could be the voice of depression, it could be it could be any sort of negative thought. But if you can kind of go outside of yourself for a moment and imagine you're looking down on yourself and you see these thoughts appearing, I've got the power. I can choose to like either give this attention or not, and that's just something that I've gotten better at over the years. Not perfect, but I think but that comes down to practice. Anything that we do to nurture good mental health, it's never ever a one and done thing. It always takes practice. It never stops. It's not like I haven't somehow reached like perfect mental health. It's good. Just it's always something that I work on, but it's a bit like running. Like I can go out and threshold at 3:10s pretty comfortably. That didn't just happen. It took practice, and it requires me to keep doing it, week in, week out. And I think whatever tools or things that you come across that work, you've got to keep sharpening them, keep sharpening those tools.
It's rare I see, just on the threshold stuff. It's off topic, but it's rare when you used to upload. I'm not sure if you upload much anymore on Strava, but I remember seeing some like 2:59, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I've seen any 3:10 thresholds from you. There's some quick ones in there. It's like anyone who's like dying to break 30 minutes, you seem to do it every Friday around Princess Park.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I definitely had a big long stretch where that was kind of the norm. And maybe I think like the rest of the world, and also I guess I'm a bit more curious now about how best to train. Like, I don't have much to lose at this point other than my fitness, which is going to happen anyway as I get older. But like I this is off topic, but but I guess it's kind of like, it's almost symbolic, but sometimes it's better to slow down.
That's good. I think a lot of listeners need to hear that, because we think, everyone often trains a bit too hard.
Not just thresholds. Sometimes just you got to slow down in life.
Exactly. Dave, it's been amazing. We've nearly gone for an hour. I could easily go for another hour and pick your brain about stuff, but I'm really grateful for your time and your, the fact that you open up and what can be a sensitive topic, and you agreed to do it in the first place, and showing that kind of like vulnerability and letting our listeners kind of into the mind of Dave McNeill tonight.
Yeah, pleasure. It's been a fun conversation. I'm not sure how much I let people in, and I feel like I was just dishing out unwarranted advice, but for what it's worth, thank you. And you're freshly shaven as well. We might put the link for your Movember page in the show notes of this episode if any listeners out there want to chuck Dave some dollars. Well, not Dave, but his fundraising page some dollars. No, it'd be greatly appreciated.